Here we are on page 85 that you should have ripped out of your workbook. Make sure your name and number gets on both sides. On number 14, we're going to be using the information to probably solve, I think it's 14, 15, and 16. So it's just like the one we just practiced and put in our journal about Natasha and Manuel, except for this time, it is as in the gym, 8 girls are standing in one line and 4 boys are standing in another line. Draw comparison bars to compare the number of people in each line. So just like we did before, we will begin with 8. We'll begin with the girls. So we'll say, let's just come under here. Girls, let's say that girls is G. And we'll draw one for boys. And we'll say that boys are B. Okay? And it says that there are 8 girls in one line and 4 boys in another. So since boys is smaller, maybe we should start with that. And we should just show that there are 4 boys total. Okay? And how many girls are there? There are 8. So there's not just 4, but there would be another set of 4 as well. There's those 4, making 8. So we'll use, this time we'll use the yellow for girls, showing 4 and 4. And then we'll use this violet red for the boys, pink. So it looks like that, okay? So they have 8, the boys have 4. So there are my comparison bars. So I've done with that. Number 15. So I actually want to go back to this. Notice how I didn't just like draw a block of 8. I wanted to show it in chunks that were equal to the boys. So if the boys had 4, and I know that 4 will go into 8, I know that that's going to be a nice number, then I will just draw my model like that, okay? Number 15 says, write 2 multiplication equations that compare the number of girls, G, to the number of boys, B. Okay, so if you try to get to the girls and you're using multiplication, so if I try to get to the girls and I use multiplication, right, how would I make this work? If I'm getting to the girls, the one that has more, and I'm using multiplication, I start with the 4, and I times it by 2, or I could do 2 times 4, because that would mean 2 groups of 4. So 4 times 2, or 2 times 4. And how would I get to B? Well, you would have to start, and since the boys have less, that's going to be using a fraction in multiplication. So you would start with 8 times, and then you don't use 4. Remember, you make that the denominator. 8 times 1/4, or you could write it 1/4 times 8. They mean the same thing, okay? That is the same as that because of the commutative property. Notice how I'm alternating what I use for my multiplication symbols. You need to make sure you are familiar with that the little dot means multiply, so does the X, okay? All right, number 16. Now it says write a division equation that compares the number of boys to the number of girls. So we're going to use it just using division. Remember what we talked about when we did fractions? 8 times 1/4, or 1/4 times 8, is the same thing as 8 divided by 4. So to get to the boys to girls, you could say a division equation would be the boys equals 8 divided by 4. I'm sorry, not 4. 8 divided by 2 to get to 4. So it's actually 8 times 1/4. Oh, this is interesting. Let's go back here. Let's go back. Oh, I love when mistakes happen like this. I'm so glad you're with me. Take a look at the girls right here. 4 times 2 is 8. The boys had 4. There was 2 groups like that, so 4 times 2 is 8. But on this one, is this a 1/4 of 8? No, I didn't think about my fact family. So we're going to come back here. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm actually recording this video, and it's pretty late at night. Miss Fisher should learn not to do that again. Let's try it again, okay? Boys and girls. So the 2 numbers that I have in here, I really should have thought this through. The product, remember, the total is 8, and the other number is 4, and I'm using division, or I say, how did I get from 4 to 8? I times by 2. Or what was 8 divided by 4? It's 2. So it's not a fourth, it's a half. There are half the amount of boys as there are girls. So it's not 8 times a fourth, it would be 8 times 1/2, or 1/2 times 8. I use that 2 as my denominator. That's why this part wasn't really making sense. I'm so glad we caught that. Whew, mistakes are so nice when you can fix them. So let's look at 16 again. Write a division equation that compares the number of boys to the number of girls. So 8 divided by 2 equals boys, or equals B, which is 4. So that makes more sense because 8 divided by 2 is the same thing as 8 times 1/2. Remember, it's the same thing. Okay, sorry about that confusion. Oh, so good to work through it. All right, number 17 is its own problem. Let's take a look at it. A collection of coins contains... Actually, I don't know if we want to spend time on that right now. I actually don't think we do. We're going to turn the page to page 86. Page 86 says, compare data in graphs and tables. So, we're going to be working on these problems, probably most of the page, if not all of it. Let's see if we can get that done. It says, how many times as many fish did Bill catch as Amy? So now we're comparing Bill and Amy. So this is supposed to be colored to 15. You can see that they've shifted it a little bit accidentally. And Amy has 5. So I'm just going to write a little 15 by Bill and a little 5 by Amy. So who has more? Bill has more. How many times as many fish did Bill catch as Amy? Well, Bill has 15. Amy has 5. So if you think about it, I'm just going to draw a dashed line to make hers equal to his. Can you see that Bill has, this would be 1 times as many. I'm going to put a yellow dot here. That would be 1 times as many. If he had that, it'd be the same amount. If he had 2 times as many, it would be up to 10. But he has 3 times as many. How many times as many fish did Bill catch as Amy? 3 times as many. Next. How many times as fish did Amy catch as Bill? So now, because it's doing the smaller amount first, you're going to be using a fraction. So instead of it being 3 times, what's the opposite of 3 whole? It would be 1/3, right? Instead of having 3, you're going to have instead of having 3 over 1, you're going to have a 1 over 3. So it's 1/3. So how many times as many fish did Amy catch as Bill? 1/3 times as many. Number 22. What is 1/3 times 15? What is 1/3 times 15? What is a third group of 15? Well, you just told me. It's whatever Amy has. So it's 5. What is 15 divided by 3? It's 5. So what is 15 over 3? 5. All of those answers are 5. No matter how you represent it, they're just showing you it can be represented in different ways. Okay, now we're going to be looking at some basketball player points. Pretty great. It wants us to write 2 statements for each pair of players. Use the word times. These are going to be really helpful to practice, especially when you get to your assignment, so make sure you're paying close attention on this one. It says compare Gina's points and Brent's point. They want 2 statements. So in this first one, we're going to do Gina first, and then on the second line, we're going to do Brent first. Okay? So Gina scored and Brent scored. First of all, we're going to compare Gina to Brent. Gina has 32. Brent has 8. Gina has 32. Brent has 8. So how many more times points did Gina score than Brent? She definitely scored more. How did you get from 8 to 32? You times by 4, right? So Gina scored 4 times as many points. As who? As Miss Fisher? As Jacob? You have to be very clear. As Brent. Now you reverse the statement. If you're going with Brent's, you know that you're going to be using 4, but you don't use 4 whole, you use 4 pieces. 4 is the denominator. So you just reverse that. Brent scored 1/4 times as many points as Gina. Okay, number 24. Compare Brent's points and now Jacob's points. So here we go. Brent has 8. Jacob has 4. So who has more now? Brent does. Brent has 8. Jacob has 4. So we're going to put our first sentence as the one that has more. Our second sentence as the one who has less. So Brent scored and Jacob scored. So Brent, he has more. Well, Jacob's was 4. Brent was 8. So how did I get from 4 to 8? I times by 2. So Brent scored 2 times as many points as Jacob. And now you reverse it. What's the opposite of 2 whole? It's having 2 as the denominator, so it's halves. So Jacob scored 1/2. Remember, you make it a unit fraction, just like we did here. You just use that number as the denominator. So 2 becomes the denominator, and it's a unit fraction. Jacob scored 1/2 times as many. You could say 1/2 as many points as. You don't have to say times as many points as, but that's okay. As Brent. Okay. Now we're comparing who? You have to be really careful who they're asking to compare. Jacob and Gina. Okay, so the person who scored the most and the person who scored the least. Who has more, Gina or Jacob? It's Gina. So Gina will be our first sentence, and Jacob will be our second sentence. Why don't you try to finish both of these sentences? The first one with Gina scored, the second one with Jacob. Try to do that on your own by pausing the video and coming back to check. All right, you should have looked at the comparisons. Gina has 32, Jacob has 4. How do I get from 4 to 32? I times by 8. So Gina scored 8 times as many points as Jacob. And how do you reverse that, right? Jacob's going to be the little tiny fraction. He scored way less, a piece of what she scored. Jacob scored 1/8. He changed it to a unit fraction. 1/8 times as many points as, what's her name? Gina. That a girl, Gina. She scored the most. Okay, on number 26, it says, solve and use the table. Which are the shortest and longest snakes? How do you know? Look, they don't really give us a whole lot of information. So they're saying Speedy is just a basic number. Speedy is a whole number. They're saying Lola is 1/5 whatever Speedy weighs. So a fraction of the amount of Speedy. So far, who's bigger, Speedy or Lola? Speedy is. Lola is just a piece of what she is. Or he, I don't know what snakes are. Or what these snakes particularly are. Plus, I hate snakes, so this problem's gross. Let's look at Pretzel. Pretzel is 5 times what? N. Who is N? Speedy. Pretzel is 5 times the amount of Speedy. And Lola is just a piece of Speedy. So if you're going largest to smallest, Pretzel's number 1, Speedy's in the middle, and Lola is number 3. Biggest, medium, small. So it asks, which are the shortest and longest snakes? Oh, sorry, it's not weight, it's length. So this is the longest snake, the medium length snake, and the shortest snake. And then it says, how do you know? So we'll explain that with some good math words, all right? The shortest snake is, whichever one had the fraction, is Lola, because she is just a piece of Speedy's length. That's my explanation for the shortest one. Now I need to do the longest one. The longest is pretzel. Because, what do we want to call pretzel? A boy? Sure. Because he is 5 times the length of Speedy. Okay? There you go. And now number 27 is going to give us a number and ask us to plug it in. If Speedy is 25 inches long, how long is Lola? So they're going to now give us a number here. They're going to say that Speedy is 25 inches. How long is Lola? That's not hard. We just plug it in over here. So we're going to go 1/5 times 25. You could do 25 tallies and group it into fifths, or you could literally just think of a fact family. Remember, the product is 25. The factor is 5, so you're figuring out who you're missing. How did I get from 5 to 25? I times by 5. So it would have 1/5 of 25 is just 5. Let's just make sure that works. Count with 5s with me with your fingers, okay? If I start with 5 and by the time I get to the end of my hand I end at 25, then it's correct because I'm counting by 5s and we're seeing if 5 is truly a fifth. You ready? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I did it. So how long is Lola? She is 5 inches. And then we're not going to do the check your understanding just because of time, but it's an interesting one. So let's go ahead and use our fact family here and make sure that we're showing that. Here's what I want to show. I want to show that the 25 went here, and we'll shade in this 5 that went there. So that's how we got the other 5. All right. What we're going to do now is you can pause the journal to go find a pair of scissors and a glue stick. But what we're going to do is we're going to flip our journal over where we had written comparisons and glued in the other thing. I want you to turn it over to the back side. And what we are going to glue in there are numbers 20 through 27 because those are such good practice problems. And it's going to have to fit in your back journal. So I'm okay to try to keep the title, Compare Data in Graphs. But I might end up having to cut it off later. I don't really know. I'm just going to cut straight across first and see what I can do. Remember, I'm going to cut really close to the numbers. I don't need the check understanding. So I'm going to cut above that. I did a little bit of work under the chart, so I'm keeping that. You really want to cut off as much as possible without cutting off important information. So I kind of kept mine square. We'll see if that ends up being good or not good. Because remember, it can't cover the holes of your journal. So I think if I put mine up high, oh, see how it covers it right there? What if I brought it down low? Nope. I'm going to put it up high-ish, like right there. And then just to be safe, what I'm going to do is cut out that little square right there. Just so I don't have to, anyway, you can figure out your own cutting your math paper. But just make sure you don't cover the holes at all. We don't want any paper sticking out on the left over here. So it's got to be inside of your journal. And I don't want any of it covering the holes right there. So it looks like I could maybe go a little bit more. So glad you're along with this cutting journey with me right here of the paper. Let's try it again. Yeah, if that fact family would have been written somewhere else, it would have worked out. But it should do right like that if I'm really careful. So get yours glued in, and then I want you to go find your homework and remembering 3.1. You should have already completed the remembering side yesterday. And now we're doing just the homework side. You also have to do Think Central today because you can. So when you look at the homework side, go ahead and look at numbers 5, 6, and 7. You should use your journal for help with that if you're having a hard time writing 2 statements. Okay, we've practiced writing 2 statements. If it's saying cookies and drinks, start with cookies, write a sentence about cookies compared to drinks, and then write a sentence about drinks compared to cookies. Again, numbers 5, 6, and 7, right here, the help for you to be able to do that are these statements that we just practiced. So please use your resources to do that. On 8 through 13, it's going to be real quick. I'm going to let you just use your mental math quick fact families. Here's an example. 18 would be in there, and 3 would be in there. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this triangle. And here's an 18 and a 3. And who would be missing? We're just going to write it off here. It'd be 6. So if you can mentally just do that, there's a 12 and a 4. Who's missing? Remember, you're building up to 12. So a 4 and a 12, how did I get from 4 to 12? Times by 3. It's seriously that easy. So you're going to be just fine. Take your time on it. Do your very best. And do Think Central and Homework 3.1.